Welcome to episode 10 of the Today I Am Sober podcast with your host, Liz W. Today on the show I'm joined by Emma Heptonstall, the divorce alchemist. Emma is a former lawyer, a family mediator and a divorce coach. She works with women, helping them to make smart, emotional and financial decisions upon divorce. Her first book, How to Be a Lady Who Leaves, The Ultimate Guide to Getting Divorce Ready, is an Amazon bestseller. Emma's been featured in Marie Claire, The Telegraph, the newspaper, the Daily Mail, and she's a regular guest on BBC Radio. So, if you're about to make the difficult decision to leave, or perhaps you've been thinking about it for a while and you're not sure whether or not you should stay, this episode is for you. Enjoy the show. Welcome on the podcast, Emma. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's fab to have you here. Now, you are an expert in all things divorce. So I can imagine you at a dinner party and people are like, oh my goodness, don't sit next to Emma. She might persuade you to get divorced.
Yeah, I think it was the Sun, or it might have been the Daily Mirror, that described me as a bit of a marriage wrecker. But I'm not, I promise. If you've got a lovely husband, hang on to him, I say.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I'm doing with mine. I'm hanging on to mine. He's not going anywhere.
Good.
But here's the thing, Emma. When you get sober, things change. And my experience is that I changed tremendously once I put the drink down. And I really started to have to look at my personal relationships. And, you know, my married relationship is a huge one I had to look at. I've undertaken and I work a 12-step program. And part of that is looking at the role you as an individual play in your relationships. And I had to effectively clean my side of the street, as we say in 12-step programs, and really look at my part in things. But one of the things I've observed over the last few years in some of the experiences I've had with other women is that, and also with myself, is you look at your part and there comes a point where you have to recognize that the unacceptable is unacceptable. Because for so many years, you know, I accepted lots of things because I was drunk and it was easy. Do you know what I mean? Just pretend things won't happen, you know, draw a veil over things and pretend everything's okay. So I think my first question for you is, how do you know when the relationship is over?
It's a great question, isn't it? It's one that clients come to me with quite frequently. Is I'm thinking about going. I'm fairly certain, but how do I really know? And for me, it's about helping women and men, because it's the same. Is getting in touch with the deepest part of them, recognizing what's their responsibility, which is their own happiness, the part they have played in the end of this relationship. Because even in those circumstances when it has been abusive, they have played some part in it. And playing a part, as you know, doesn't mean blame, and it doesn't mean shame. It's just acknowledging the part that you have played. And when you can take the part you've played and look at yourself and say, is this what I want for the rest of my life? Can I do it differently? Am I willing to do it differently? And if I'm not willing to change me, knowing that I can never change him or her, I'm never responsible for whether they change. If I base my decision on, will I change? And the answer's no, I don't want to. I'm actually quite happy with myself as I am. Or B, I know they won't change, or at least they don't appear to change, and I'm not willing to accept their behavior anymore. Then if you don't accept their behavior, the only option that you have to do then is to remove yourself from the situation, and that may mean leaving.
Now, obviously, we're not covering off domestic abuse or violence in this conversation, and
Yeah.
I know you well enough to know that you would probably strongly recommend any woman or man that is in a relationship where there is domestic violence, be that physical, emotional, verbal, financial, to get out.
Yes. There are degrees of domestic abuse. If you are physically unsafe, and if you are immediately emotionally unsafe, then you can visit websites like refuge.org, womensaid.org. Seek advice on those kinds of websites. Remember to hit the cover my tracks button before you leave, and have a plan to leave if it's physically unsafe for you to just pack your bags and go. If you're in an financially abusive situation, it can be slightly more tricky because you may not have the resources to get out, and that's where you need to have a plan, so that you can extricate yourself from that relationship. But most of the advice that I give is for women who are not in a situation where they are imminently at physical danger. So caveat what I say, that if you are in that situation of being in immediate physical danger, you do need to get out. You need to pack your bag, even if it's surreptitiously. You need to make sure that you've got as many documents with you as you possibly can, particularly your birth certificate, your passport, the children's passports. And just like when you had your children and you had your birthing bag ready somewhere in the house, that you have that, so that if you do need to leave, you can just go.
Perfect. So thank you for that caveat, because I think it's really important to say that we're not talking in this conversation about those kinds of situations.
That's right, yeah.
Because obviously, if you're listening to this, we want to make sure you're safe. So stay safe, please. But one of the things that you said a moment ago that really resonated with me is the fact that you said, I can't change him or her.
Yeah.
And one of the things before I got sober, I always thought, it's all right, he'll change. He'll change. I'll change him, because, I felt like I was Superwoman and I could do absolutely everything. And, if I'm the perfect wife, because at heart, I'm a good girl. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a classic people pleaser. There are traits of codependency in me. And I want to make sure that, he's okay. So, I've been married just over 20 years now. And I naively thought that I would be able to change him.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what, ladies? After 20 years, I've not changed my husband one little bit. Not one. Yeah. However, I've changed. And, our relationship has changed during, marriage, the birth of our son, moving home, death of parents. There's been some major life changes that have gone on in my personal relationship with my husband. But the one thing I can't do is I can't change him. I can only change myself.
Yeah.
And I really like the fact that you said they won't change. You can't change somebody else, because I think that's hugely important. But going from a point of I'm not happy, we'll assume that there's no violence or domestic abuse, but I'm not happy. I can't envisage a future with this person. Going from being unhappy to actually saying the D word, which is almost as bad as the C word in some situations. How do you get from that point of I'm not happy to leaving? Because that's a huge step, and it's a very scary step, particularly if there's children involved. So what's your experience of working with women around their decision-making process?
Well, it's a really great observation that you make, Liz, because it is a scary thing to do. And when I started my business, I did some very unscientific research on Facebook, just asking women who had already left. So, not people that I was wanting to work with, but people that were already through and out the other side, how long it had taken them to leave. And the average was 5 years.
Wow.
The average was 5 years. And some women even reached out and said they waited for the whole of their children's childhood. One woman even said that she hadn't been intimate with her husband since her last child was conceived, and her son was now 18, and she was just waiting for the children to grow, and then she was going to go. So, some people do like literally take their commitment to marriage so seriously that even though they are unhappy, they stay. For others, they sit on it for a good period of time. I'm yet to meet the woman who woke up one day and thought, I'm gonna leave my husband today. It doesn't usually happen like that. It usually starts with a bit of a niggling feeling that we can squash down, particularly if we're good girls and probably good boys as well, and we don't want to disappoint people, particularly our own parents. That is a huge one. I have clients whose own parents are divorced, and yet they're appalled at the idea that their children might get divorced, yet they're divorced themselves. So they've been there, and still there's the stigma and the shame. So society, in a way, hasn't moved on. So getting the courage to go really generally is someone getting absolutely to the end of their rope of, I can't take it anymore, knowing that they're going to disappoint their own parents, that the children might be upset. Good girls also worry about him, even if he's pretty much the cause of their unhappiness, about how he or the other person will cope with the divorce and what they'll do with themselves. So it's about being able to let go of the responsibility for other people's emotions is a big one. It's like, it doesn't matter whether your mum or your dad disagree with you. They're not married to your husband. They're not living your life. And your children will eventually grow and go on to have relationships of their own. You are you, and you're responsible for you and what happens. And when you look back at the end of your life, will you be pleased about the decisions you've made? And it's talking to people in those terms that helps them make that decision, because it comes back to responsibility. Your happiness is always your responsibility. And as far as we know, whatever your religious persuasion, you don't get a medal for martyring yourself. So, and maybe I'll get proved wrong at some point in the future, but so far as we know, you don't get a medal for it. So nobody's going to go, oh yes, but you ruined your own life. But yes, but weren't you a good girl? You stayed, even though you were miserable. I often ask people to think about what advice they would give their own children if they came to them in that situation. What would they say? And that is often the light bulb moment. It's like, well, of course I'd tell them to leave. And so I just stop and look at them and just hold the space and go, okay. And you come to me for what then?
So let's talk about children, because, a moment ago you were talking about a lady who'd stayed until her youngest was 18. What's your personal view on staying for the sake of the children?
My personal view on staying for the sake of the children, and full disclosure, I'm not a parent, not by choice, I might add. So I'd have loved to have been a parent, but I'm not one. But my honest opinion is, do not stay for the sake of your children. They won't thank you for it in the end. The majority of children will not thank you for it. It is your responsibility as a parent to role model good adult relationships. And if you're not doing that for whatever reason, actually, the video that you are showing your children is dysfunction and unhappiness, and they are more likely to model that than, although they may consciously say to themselves, I'm not going to marry somebody like my dad who doesn't treat my mother very well, or I'm not going to be like my mother who speaks to my father like he's a piece of rubbish. I'm going to do it differently. But 9 times out of 10, they go and replay the video that they were shown and end up in their own dysfunctional relationships because unconsciously it feels familiar. So if you want your children to have happy marriages, get out of yours if it's miserable.
Well, if that wasn't a drop the mic moment, I don't know what was. I'm still churning around in my head that quote that that phrase that you said is that you don't get a medal for martyrdom. Only because in our family, I used to very occasionally as a child do the washing up, and my brother used to say to me, "What, do you want a medal for that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do actually." He said, "Oh, your chest isn't big enough." So yeah, I've got small boobs, listeners, just for the record. Anyway, wow. We've talked about dysfunction. We've talked about carrying, that relationship dynamic that children see carrying on into their own lives. And obviously divorce is a way to break that cycle. But what about services like Relate and getting kind of couple counselling? What's your view on trying that before obviously saying, that's it, I'm done, I've had enough, I'm out?
Great question. I recommend that everybody try some kind of counselling service before they make the decision. And to be fair, I would say at least 97% of the people I work with have done that, usually more than once, because it's the obvious solution. Divorce is not an easy option. It's messy, it takes time, it's financially extremely costly, it's emotionally draining. So it's not up there on the top 10 things you want to do with your life at all. It's on nobody's bucket list. So do what you can to support yourself, to know, and to give that other person, if for you the issue is a behavior they're doing that is not supporting you, to give them that opportunity. And sometimes there is nothing wrong. Sometimes you go on a personal development journey, you get sober, for example, you change, your expectations change, your boundaries change, your self-worth changes. And if your partner isn't able to meet you where you are now, it doesn't make them a bad person. They can be lovely, they can be kind, they can be caring, but if they're not what you any longer need, that makes sense? That doesn't make sense. But if you don't need what they offer any longer and you need something different, then the chances are they need you to be somebody you're no longer either. So the kindest and the most giving thing that you can do is end the relationship, so they can meet somebody for themselves that is more on their wavelength, and you have the opportunity, potentially, if you wanted, to meet somebody that is going to meet you where you are now.
Brilliant advice. Thanks for that, Emma. So listen, you and I can talk for hours about anything because
we do.
Yeah, full disclosure, Emma and I talk all the time. We're business besties and we're really good friends. So you and I can talk for hours about all sorts of subjects. But, if there's any listeners out there that are struggling with that decision, and that they think that perhaps they want to be a lady who leaves, and there's lots of, we've talked about some of the emotional challenges and there's lots of fear around it. They're not sure whether they're quite ready. Perhaps they've tried Relate or some other form of couple counselling. What resources are available to help them in terms of making that decision? And how can you help them?
There are plenty of blogs on my website and on other websites. So if you follow things like Huffington Post, Elephant Journal, those kind of places, you'll find lots of information on my website too. That's www.emmaheptonstall.com. You've got the option to sign up to 7 simple steps, which is basically an email program that drops into your email box over a period of 7 days, which helps you work out whether or not your relationship is done. Because the thing is, if you're unhappy with you, you're going to take yourself with you when you leave. And if you move out or you ask him to leave and he goes and meets someone else, time goes on and you actually realize the problem is you. It's nothing to do with him or the marriage or the house or the car or how much you earn, but it's something about you that you are not happy with. You need to find that out before you do anything and go and work on yourself first. And again, it comes back to that word responsibility. Sort your own shit out first, if I can use that expression. Get yourself sorted. Once you know you and you love you, then you can make more rational decisions about the other things in your life. But if you're all over the place, you really can't make a decision about whether you like your husband or not, because your judgment is clouded by what's going on with you. So it always comes back to you. And that's where the issue of responsibility comes in. Whether you're in an abusive relationship, and that doesn't mean you're responsible for abuse, because you're not, but if the stuff going on with you that is allowing you to put up with it, to have invited it in the first place by the choice of partner that you made from the very beginning, and you ignored the red flags that were maybe there, then you need to take it back to you and make decisions from that.
Perfect. So listeners, there's a fabulous free resource that Emma's got. If you're considering leaving your partner, to support you and to help you with that decision making process. Emma's also written a fabulous book called How to Be a Lady Who Leaves, The Ultimate Guide to Getting Divorce Ready, which is available on Amazon. You can also buy it directly from your website, emmaheptonstall.com. And I know that if you do buy the physical book from Emma directly, she sends it in a lovely pink package, and there's some little surprises in there for you too. But if you don't want your husband to see that you've got a book called How to Be a Lady Who Leaves, you'll be pleased to know that you can also get it on the Kindle, if you have a Kindle, of course. So Emma, thank you so much for joining me today for this very short conversation about how to be a lady who leaves and how to know whether or not you're ready to move to the next level in terms of separating and potentially leaving your husband or partner. It's not the most joyous of conversations talking about divorce, but, as we said at the outset, it's a reality of life. Lots and lots of relationships break down to the point of divorce. And it's brilliant to know that there are people like you out there to help women navigate that journey. So Emma, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you want to connect with Emma, all of her details are in the show notes.
Thanks very much for chatting with me today, Liz.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Today I Am Sober podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I love your feedback. So come and find me on social media. All of the links are in the show notes. Until next time, bye.